Hi, this is Jim Musser with Upstream Ministries, and this is my April 22nd, 2026 video on views from downstream. In the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about specific traits of a follower of Jesus. And 2 weeks ago, I talked about asking forgiveness, confessing our sins one to another, and asking forgiveness. And then last week, I talked about the trait of kindness and how that can make us a light in the world for Jesus. And this week, I want to talk about tolerance. Now, that can be a loaded word. I heard that so many times as a campus pastor that we need to be tolerant of each other. And I agree with that in general, but I also understood what often university officials meant by that. But tolerance that I want to talk about today is the tolerance of persecution. We, I think, as Americans, as Christians in America, have a very low threshold of tolerance of anything we perceive as persecution. Now, back during COVID, when the government felt like it was best to close large gatherings, including church services, many Christians complained about being persecuted about that. And we've complained about university professors being intolerant of us and persecuting us, and government persecuting us, and that the church in America is undergoing much persecution. And we tend to resent that and we react to it. We demand our rights. And I think it's easy for us in America on the fact that there is a basis in our history that there was a somewhat Christian understanding in our founders. Judeo-Christian often is referred to, that has formed the basis of our country. And so for many people, they will say, well, we're a Christian nation. And so, in essence, we shouldn't tolerate persecution because we're a Christian nation and we're going to lash out against it, any form of it, whether it's saying Merry Christmas, or having a nativity scene, or in a public spot, whatever. There's been resistance to any pushback against those things. But the reality is that Christians should expect persecution. Christians have always been persecuted in this world. And Jesus, in his Sermon on the Mount, said this. He said, "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." I don't know many believers today in our country who in essence rejoice in persecution. I see many complain about it. Many lash out against it. I see very few rejoicing because of it. And I think since these words were spoken by Jesus, we need to reflect on them a little bit and let them have the impact I think he intended on our attitudes and behavior. Because we should not be surprised that we're persecuted. Now, the reality is persecution is a relative term. For persecution here, it's being told you can't pray, or you can't say this particular thing. I had in college, when I told my social work supervisor that I didn't feel like I could not share my faith with patients if they asked me, she said, "Well, I don't know if you can have your internship." That was persecution, and I told her directly, "Well, that's the way it is," and I ended up getting my internship. But that's some part of persecution, but maybe it's more severe because it threatened my chosen career. But there are people in this world, in nations, that they're being persecuted to death or imprisonment. And oftentimes, in talking with people, it almost sounds like they don't see the difference at all. That persecution here is very different than persecution, say, in China or North Korea or Iran, where literally you can give up your life or your freedom because you're a Christian. Now, there aren't many Americans that have to fear that. But even so, Jesus is telling us that our reward for enduring persecution will be great in heaven. That we will be honored for that. We will be rewarded for that. I don't think he's saying that we are going to be rewarded for complaining about it and woe is me because I can't say a prayer when I want to say it. Jesus is basically saying, focus on me, follow me, and don't worry about what people are saying to you and about you, because they said the same things and did the same things to me. And so basically, persecution is walking in the footsteps of Jesus. It's experiencing what he experienced. And it's not something that we have to fight and resist at all costs. Sometimes we just have to accept it and be kind. And I think of Corrie ten Boom, how she and her sister Betsy how horribly treated they were by their Nazi captors. And yet, at every point, particularly Betsy, she tried to be kind to her persecutors because she felt like that's exactly what Jesus called her to do. And so I just want to encourage us to, when we feel like we are being persecuted, not to lash out and demand our rights, but just reflect and say, this is an opportunity for me to experience what Jesus experienced. And that's an honor. And we will be rewarded for it. So think about that. As you think about some of the things going on in our country today, and where you may think that your rights are being violated, your rights of freedom of worship, and realize how you react is important. And Jesus called us to react a certain way. And it wasn't to lash out and fight back. It was to count it all joy because we're experiencing what he experienced and the godly men and women experienced before him in the prophets. So, more thought about what it looks like to be a disciple of Jesus and how we live that out in the world. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.